So the way Anthem deals with player hubs seems to be a little bit different compared to what we're used to seeing in other games of the genre. Normally, when you think about player hubs in the online, you would expect big cities filled with quest givers, vendors, and even more so, players of all levels going about their daily routines. Anthem seems to be going a little bit against the trend with this one, and at least at the time of making this video, the only player hub we know of, which is of course Fort Tarsis, is designed as mostly a solo experience, a private refuge if you will. Now there were discussions being made about additional cities in Anthem, as Fort Tarsis is not the only human colony in it, but since there is not much information about that available, I will strictly refer to the fort for now. So during a recent presentation we found out a lot more details about BioWare's plan on making Fort Tarsis different, and how this will end up being a different experience to how you typically expect from online games. We've seen NPC relationships, story development, lore to uncover, sections to unlock, and customize, among many other things. Now if you're a BioWare fan for some time now and have prior experience with some of their previous games, especially the Mass Effect and Dragon Age series, then all of this should probably sound familiar to you, and that is because these concepts have been used in the past with great success. One notable and quite recent example we have at hand is obviously Skyforge from Dragon Age Inquisition, which shares pretty much a lot of the similarities with Fort Tarsis, except that this time around Anthem seems to be expanding upon it. So today we're going to go over everything you'll be able to do in the fort, how this is different from other player hubs, from other similar games, and so on. And I will begin with how the story progression is made, because it's not as linear as you might think. In fact, there's quite a little bit of decision making involved from a story point of view, and it is interesting how BioWare manages to deal with all of that in a game where player co-op is such a fundamental mechanic. So the general rule when it comes to story development, cutscenes, decision makings, and so on, all of that will be done over in Fort Tarsis. Meanwhile, the actual gameplay, the combat, finishing objectives, and so on is done while outside of the fort. Having a mission structure such as this leaves great room for players to make choices they care about in the story itself, while keeping the encounters pretty much unchanged. An example was given some time ago by somebody over at BioWare. Unfortunately, I cannot find the source anymore as it's been quite some time since then, but it basically boils down to this. If two players choose different paths in their story, they don't have to worry about not being able to group up for the same missions, as the structure remains unchanged, but rather some of the fine details in the story itself and role related stuff are going to be different from one another. One example was given in this regard, and it basically went like this. Two players made two choices that were different, and both of them were only available while on the fort. The mission structure outside of the fort was pretty much left unchanged, the encounters themselves were pretty much the same, the end objectives was still very similar. The only thing that was slightly different was the background chatter that went throughout the mission itself, throughout the expedition, and there's something similar to this being done in Red Dead Online to a certain extent, just so I can give you a few reference points. To explain this a little bit more to you, in Red Dead Online story component, party members are even left to vote on what the outcome should be of a certain mission, like for example killing off a certain character or sparing him. But that decision doesn't separate them, and the structure pretty much remains unchanged. From a gameplay point of view, you're not going to see much difference, it's still going to be the same as it was before. Now since this is a BioWare game we're talking about, obviously there's going to be some political turmoil, there's also going to be some intrigue, and you'll be thrown right in the middle of it. Luckily enough, you won't feel or should not feel detached from any of that, as the game does offer you the possibility to form relationships with many of the characters that exist over in Fort Tarsis and beyond of it, which is also the second point on today's list and one of the things you can do in the game. While playing Anthem and having conversations, you will see familiar dialogue systems that give you options to pick from. The NPCs here will have their daily routines and will have different things to talk to you about as the game progresses. Most notably, there's your crew members, of which you'll have several of, helping you out in various ways throughout the story itself, as as well as outside of it. So they don't just serve as quest givers, but you can also have interactions with them and find out a little bit more about their daily lives. But yeah, you can find out more about these characters if you check the main Anthem website. I'm going to leave the details for maybe a later video, as I don't want to extend this too long. But these relationships that you will form by having conversations and finding more about these characters and even doing missions for them will ultimately make you better understand the world of Anthem and give you something else to strive for other than combat and gear. And by the way, in case it was still not obvious to you, romance is not going to be an option in this game, unfortunately, and I don't think that's going to be for the future. At number 3, regular content is something you can also expect here, and this includes side missions for various factions that exist in the world of Anthem. There are several of them, including the Sentinels, which are like these protectors of Fort Tarsis. Then there's the Corvus, the Ciphers, the Arcanists, and you can read about them on the Anthem website, but you will come in contact with various representatives of these factions throughout the game itself and randomly on the fort. So increasing your standing with them and with these factions will bring you additional missions, contracts, and in the process obviously better loot. Outside of that, there's also going to be repeatable content you can do in order to get extra rewards. So we're going to have daily, weekly, and even monthly challenges to complete, and there hasn't been too much info on what types of rewards we will get from this, but at the very least it will provide additional avenues for us to improve our characters. There's also the alliance system that I've talked about yesterday briefly, and in case you missed that, this pretty much rewards players who stick together regularly, and it kind of promotes co-op. It's a very good way of promoting co-op. Yeah, props to BioWare, hopefully it goes as well as it sounds. Obviously you can't talk about a player hub without taking into account the multitude of options that deal solely with your character's progression. As I've said, that is still one of the big things that you're going to be doing and aiming for in the world of Anthem. Fort Tarsis has various vendors and tools which deal with this sort of thing. Most notably, we have the Javelin Forge, and from here you'll be able to do various actions. Among them is unlocking new javelins as you level up, customize them. This is also the same area you will start your expeditions from by interacting with your actual javelin. On the left side of the bay itself, on the opposite side of the forge, there's also going to be a vault, a player vault, and this holds and stores your items. Up to 300 of them to be more precise, including weapons, components, gear pieces, consumables, crafting materials, and a junk tab, so it's pretty extensive. There's also at least one NPC at the fort that deals solely with upgrading your javelin, including cosmetics and gear, and his name is obviously Prospero. You've seen him in the IGN video like last week. You can find him at the bazaar right before the Javelin Bay, and from him you can take various missions that deal with javelin upgrades, and he's mostly going to send you on expeditions to find a material called Amber, which seems to be powering most of the technology in the world of Anthem, so it seems to be quite important. Now, one thing that you should keep in mind about Fort Tarsis is that it's not going to automatically be open to you in its entirety from the very start, but rather it will feature areas to unlock and repair as you progress throughout the game. You will begin obviously with the main bazaar area with all of the vendors as well as the Javelin Bays. There's also an underground section, an upper passage, and much more to that. You unlock new areas, you make them better, you remove the clutter as you progress throughout the story, and it's pretty sweet. I also hope that there's going to be some customization in it, and from the looks of it, there are strong indications that there's going to be. And also there's a bar. I mean, there's no BioWare game without a freaking bar, so you can go ahead, have a drink, and just, do some random stuff if that is what you want. Finally, I will end this video with the Codex entries, something that's become kind of like a staple for BioWare games, and this is basically like the Codex entries from previous games. You will see them popping up both in Fort Tarsis and while out there in the free roam during expeditions and whatnot. You will most probably want to unlock as many of these Codex entries as possible, as they will give you additional information about the lore, but also new contacts to talk to, so it might even point us towards new missions and possibly achievements to do, which kind of sounds like in tune with something that BioWare would do. But yeah, with this I think I've summarized everything you can do and expect from Fort Tarsis. There's still a few concerns I have about it, specifically not being able to sprint and being exclusively first person, which if you think about it is exactly the opposite of how Destiny does it, which is, kind of strange, but yeah, that is basically it. Also, before ending this video, I will mention that yesterday's giveaway is still underway. giveaway, and it will end tomorrow right before the VIP demo goes live, so use the links down below to try your luck at winning a VIP demo code if you didn't already. Additionally, there is a second giveaway I'm going to put on this channel. You can join for 5 extra VIP codes, and you can do so by joining the Discord server below, who's also forming a guild for Anthem, so look forward to that, especially if you want to like group up with people. If needed, I will update the pinned post in the comment section with all of the details required, and I will answer as many questions as possible, but for the most part the 2 giveaways are going to be posted in the comment section as well as in the description of this video. In the meantime, if this video was useful to you, then make sure to leave a thumbs up on it, I would super appreciate that. Also hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time, so peace out.